Commerce and the secret deal behind American independence. You examine the revolution as a legal economic project as much as a moral crusade. You trace how constitutional grievance, statutory enforcement, and mercantile incentives converged into an informal coalition that financed, legitimated, and sustained separation from Britain. You test a central claim, that ideals and interests were not rivals but complements, with ideology mobilizing the many while commerce underwrote organization, logistics, and staying power. Footnote. This section states your thesis that liberty rhetoric and mercantile power formed a mutually reinforcing engine of independence. Scope and method. You adopt a documentary approach, private correspondence, customs records, legislative texts, pamphlets, and foreign diplomatic reports. You distinguish claims from evidence by asking three questions. 1. Who paid for agitation and supply? 2. Who benefited from altered trade law? 3. What contemporaries said when they thought no one was listening? You treat smuggling not as anecdote but as a regulatory market, shaped by the Navigation Acts, writs of assistance, and local jury nullification. Footnote. This section explains how you weigh sources to separate inference from proof in reconstructing quiet bargains. Imperial Debt, Law, and Enforcement 1763 to 1770. You start with cost. After 1763, Britain serviced enlarged debt and garrisoned North America. Parliament tightened revenue by statute and administration, reading contribution as imperial equity. You read colonial pushback as constitutional, representation, jury trial, search, and the scope of parliamentary power over internal taxation. Yet you also note that stricter customs threatened entrenched colonial business models that had flourished under lax enforcement. Footnote. This section situates constitutional grievance within a fiscal administrative turn that raised the stakes for colonial commerce. Illicit trade and elite incentives. You analyze smuggling as a high-status enterprise, not mere petty crime. Leading merchants in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia arbitrage duties on molasses, sugar, and tea, funding newspapers, assemblies, and committees. Seizures like the case of the sloop Liberty signaled that renewed enforcement endangered capital and networks. For such elites, liberty included freedom from metropolitan monopolies that could erase their margins. Footnote. This section argues that enforcement imperiled the balance sheets of political sponsors whose wealth amplified dissent. Informal coalition, radicals and merchants. You map the alignment. Organizers needed cash, presses, and ships, merchants needed mass legitimacy to mask commercial stakes. The bargain was tacit, funds and influence in exchange for mobilization and narrative. You show how committees of correspondence, town meetings, and boycotts translated private risk into public principle, transforming trade disputes into constitutional theater with broad participation. Footnote. This section describes how ideology and money fused into a functional partnership without formal contracts. The Tea Act of 1773, Price, Monopoly, and Protest. You read the Tea Act as a pricing statute with political consequences. By authorizing direct sale by the East India Company, London lowered retail cost while preserving a duty, undercutting colonial middlemen and illicit Dutch tea. You explain why cheaper lawful tea still drew fury, accepting it validated parliamentary taxation and annihilated smuggling income. The Boston Tea Party thus operated as both constitutional symbolism and commercial defense. Footnote. This section shows that dramatic protest served principle and protected threatened distribution channels simultaneously. Coercive Acts and Financial Commitment 1774 to 1775. You trace escalation. Port closure and reconstitution of Massachusetts governance converted elite hesitation into necessity. With trade strangled, merchants doubled down, outfitting militias, underwriting pamphleteers, and absorbing boycott costs. Organizers reciprocated by framing sacrifice as civic virtue, aligning private survival with public purpose. By April 1775, the funding base and the mobilized public converged into open conflict. Footnote. This section explains how sanctions converted a tactical alliance into full financial commitment to resistance. Foreign covert support in war finance. You document early clandestine outreach to France and other rivals of Britain. Covert aid, money, munitions, and credit flowed before formal treaties, traded for future commercial preference. You show how foreign credit lines bridge the gap between rhetoric and supply, allowing a resource-poor rebellion to survive long enough for battlefield and diplomatic victories to compound. Footnote. This section highlights external financing as the hinge between colonial resolve and strategic feasibility. Post-war political economy. From illicit to lawful. You follow the money after victory. Former smugglers became respectable magnates, shaping tariff schedules, coastal trade, and access to new markets. The same logistical talent that once evaded customs now organized national commerce. Ideals did not vanish, they were constitutionalized. But you note that the settlement also secured control of trade by American actors who had invested early in independence. Footnote. This section shows how wartime networks converted into peacetime dominance under a legal regime they helped create. Evidence, limits, and competing explanations. You acknowledge gaps. Few deals were written, prudence kept bargains oral. You therefore triangulate from letters, customs diaries, price series, ship manifests, and gubernatorial reports. You test alternative narratives, spontaneous popular uprising, ideological purity, or metropolitan miscalculation alone. Your conclusion is additive, not cynical. Principle and profit marched together because each required the other to win. Footnote. This section defends inference from circumstantial records while rejecting reduction of the revolution to greed alone. Conclusion. Liberty's political economy. You conclude that independence was propelled by a coalition in which ideas mobilized, money sustained, and foreign credit enabled. You counsel readers to judge the revolution by both its texts and its balance sheets. In doing so, you neither diminish its ideals nor romanticize its financiers. You simply accept that durable constitutional change usually rides on aligned incentives. Footnote. This section closes by asserting that the revolution's success lay in coupling normative claims with solvency and supply.